Hello my dear friends, and welcome to my channel. Get yourself comfortable and prepare for some interesting stories. One of them is a story about an entitled mother who sends her kids into my garden repeatedly, even after being told not to, and then calls the police on me. Please subscribe if you haven't, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I don't have any kids, but have my younger sister living with me for around 10 years. And we have a trampoline still in our back garden from when she was younger. Neighbor to the left of me has 4 kids and moved in a year ago. 2 weeks ago, Glasgow started getting really good weather, so the kids have been out playing constantly. Not an issue. They asked if I could let the kids use the trampoline one day, so I was like, sure, but only for a bit because I have friends coming over for some drinks. 7 p.m. comes. I ask them to go home because my 5 friends have shown up and we're going to be drinking. Cue the crying. They leave the garden upset, but hey, that's not my issue. They've been on it for 3 hours at this point. Their mom pops her head out her bedroom window and asks if they can stay in the garden longer. No, I'm not your babysitter. She's annoyed, but drops it. Last week I came home from some shopping and to my surprise found all 4 kids in the garden, plus their younger cousin. Asked them to leave to tell them they can't just come into my garden without me there, and they didn't even ask. They refused to leave, so I shout up at their mom and tell her to get them out of the garden. She says, let them play for a bit, you don't even use it. Okay, but still, not your garden. Eventually we get into an argument and they leave. She's pissed off and shouting, saying I'm being a Karen, and I should let them in. I tell her not to ask again, because the answer will be no. This happened again the day after. All 4 kids plus their cousin, waiting till I moved the car from the drive, headed straight into the garden. So I woke up this morning. I've since put a lock on the trampoline, just a small one on the mesh safety enclosure to stop them from opening it up, 'cause I'm petty AF. Plus, it's Saturday, I'm not working today, my day off, and I want a long lie. But no, the neighbor decides that at 9 a.m. this morning, her kids are being fired straight out the house with breakfast bars and a bottle of water, and they head straight into the garden. So I can hear them from my window. I look out and tell them to leave. By the time I get downstairs, Mom has descended from her house and is trying to climb the fence between our gardens, shouting about how I used to let them use it and she's going to call the police for hitting her kids. Great, you do that. I'll be sure to show them the Ring camera footage, which coincidentally also has footage of your husband picking the lock open so your brats can use the trampoline. So long story short, an entitled mother sends her kids into my garden repeatedly even after being told not to, calls the police on me for harassment and hitting her kids, and ends up getting her own husband arrested for theft and housebreaking and criminal damage. Unhook the springs, tip it, and say you got rid of the trampoline because the springs were rusty and you wanted the space in the garden to sunbathe. Also consider paving over the grass, assuming it's on grass, as it's more obviously an adult space there. Whatever you do though, don't get an outside hot tub, or you'll have the neighbors trying to use it. I'm 20, and I moved out of my parents' house at 18, because I really can't stand them. And it's for all of the kinds of reasons you can guess. They were jerks, favored my younger siblings, used me as free childcare, told me what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine, and all of that other BS. When I left, my dad told me not to let the door hit me on my way out and don't come back. I got the smallest and cheapest apartment I could find and have worked the same full-time job for 2 years. My parents didn't even hold out for a month before calling me and begging me to come back home, because without me, someone else had to watch my siblings. I refused because now I finally had time for myself. My dad eventually called me and actually demanded I move back home and pay them rent instead, because family is more important than my personal independence. I said back to him that my life is important too, and for once I'm getting to live for myself. So he basically said, well then, see how long you can last without us. And we didn't talk for months. I don't know what he was hoping for. I managed well enough by myself. My family seemed to slowly accept that I wasn't going to come crawling back, and over time we seemed to mend things. I could tell they were having a hard time dealing with the fact things were on my terms and not theirs. They begged me to watch my youngest siblings from time to time, even though the two that are closest to me in age are in their mid-teens now. But my parents don't want to put babysitting on them any more than they have to, which is hypocritical of them since they tried to put it on me as much as possible. And yes, I have called them out on that. They responded with gaslighting and more months of silence yet again. And again, they were the ones to come crawling back to me for help. Not long ago, I bought myself a used Nintendo Switch, though could only afford one game for it at the moment, which is Mario Kart. I got it bundled with the console for a good deal. My mom came by on a Saturday and asked me to watch my two youngest siblings for a while. She basically pushed them in the door at me and then ran. And I was stuck with these two rowdy kids all day in my tiny apartment. My mom didn't come back until after 9 p.m. And that was because I called her and made her come and get the kids. And she really didn't like that I cut her fun time short. I said that unless she wanted to pay me, I wasn't going to be watching my siblings all day anymore. And the next time I won't even open the door, and I'll call the cops if she just leaves them outside. The next morning I realized I couldn't find my Switch anywhere. So I called my parents, and like I thought, one of my siblings took it. I said I was coming over to get it right away, but my mom said it could wait because my youngest sibling was gaming on it, and she didn't have the heart to take it away. I said it was taken without my permission, and I would be taking it back. I got on my bike and rode there ASAP. And when I arrived, my sibling was crying because the Switch's battery had gone dead and they didn't have the charger. I told them to give it back, but my dad took it and said I could have it back when I agreed to start helping out with the siblings more. I told him if that's how he wanted to play this, I'd get the police involved. And no, I was not bluffing. He dug his heels in and insisted I wouldn't do it, until I pulled my phone out and started dialing. My mom yelled, "Wait!" and hurriedly took my Switch back from my dad. He called her a traitor and demanded she return it to him instead of me, but she said it wasn't worth having the police called on them. Before leaving, I told them if this ever happens again, I'd be calling the police first. And if they want a Switch for my siblings so bad, they can just get their own. My dad yelled that I can't disrespect him like that, and I countered that even though I'm an adult, he's not bothered to ever show an ounce of respect to me. And I'd had enough. Then I walked out with him yelling at me to come back and face him. Right now it's back to silence from them. My mom texted me once, begging me to still watch my siblings. I said that if she ever wanted me to babysit so bad she could pay me, and I'd only take the money in advance, because I'm not doing it for free anymore, especially after they stole from me and tried to keep from returning my property. They don't own me. I'm an adult with my own place and my own life. It's been over a week since that text convo, and none of them has of yet talked to me again, which is fine. They can deal with their own messes. Hey, something just occurred to me. It actually might be a really good idea for you to call the cops on them. The mom's reaction to the police makes me wonder if they're hiding something, and it makes me genuinely concerned for the well-being of your siblings. I am glad you got out, but your siblings don't have that luxury, and there could be some serious sketchy things behind the scenes. Call CPS, trust me. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm 30 and a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated that she had tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall? Etc. She stated that she has a pounding headache and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain, and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon. The caring neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling, "You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow, and she needs to watch my kids." My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff, then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station, and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids. My partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open. And who do I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She yells back, "I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow." Then she starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell. I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says, "You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke." My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot, and I slam and lock the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too, when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on the scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer, and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about. She said that the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time, with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all, because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these things. Like I said in the beginning, this happened last night, so I don't have any updates, but I'll post an update when I learn more. Small update. My contact at the hospital said the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There is no update on the neighbor. I probably will not hear anything back until my next shift day. Update. Hey everyone, sorry for the late update. Unfortunately, it's not as exciting as some of you would hope for. So I got in touch with the officer on that call. He said the woman was not formally charged with anything. The patient is back home now and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of a bleed, and she was discharged the next day. She was advised to file an order of protection from the neighbor, but I don't believe I will ever be privy to that information unless something happens again. I read a majority of the comments, and most people are saying to contact elder abuse and DCFS. The only problem with filing those reports is having concrete proof. We never actually saw any children, so we can't really say that they're abused or neglected at all. We can say that we have a suspicion, but for all we know, they could be living the best lives at home with the entitled parent. If the entitled parent had left and abandoned her kids, that's another story. Calling DCFS without any signs of child abuse and just working off hearsay can just cause more problems if the accusations are unfounded. The same can pretty much be applied about the elder abuse. We have no actual proof of elder abuse occurring. The entitled neighbor was not involved in the actual fall, and there was no suspicion of any kind of financial, physical, emotional, or social abuse. The way our patient talked about the kids getting dumped on her was in more of an inconsiderate way and not an abusive way. Long story short, the entitled neighbor was just kind of an idiot. I am, however, hoping that the patient presses charges for assault, but I don't know if she will. Oh my. I'd imagine that if the roles were reversed and the EM was the one who fell and got hurt, she'd still be trying to drop her kids off with the neighbor, saying, "It's an emergency. You must take care of my kids. I might die if I don't go to the hospital." It may not have ended well for her, but I'm glad you got your patient safely to the hospital, and hopefully she's all right with no severe injuries, and the police don't release the EM without consequences. Well guys, that's it for today. If you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, I'm gonna link it right here. The story is about an OP's aunt who yelled at her for drinking because OP has to babysit aunt's kids. Check this out if you haven't, and I'll see you in my next video.